right, we are live and we're recording. So, hope you guys are having a great week so far. So, if you are watching this live, or if you're one of a client of mine, because I'm probably going to send this to you today to give you some tips on navigating Thanksgiving. This is what this is going to all be about, and I probably will post this as a separate podcast, maybe in a couple of weeks. And all of these tips, all these things can be applied to really any holiday or really any celebration that you have, whether it be anniversary celebration, birthday celebration, graduation celebration, Christmas, whatever holiday you can think of, these tips can be applied for this. So, this time of year, it's funny. Like, I feel like there is this overcomplication of what do I do on Thanksgiving? Like, if you're on a fitness journey, a fat loss journey, or you are tracking your food intake, there's a lot of stress and anxiety of, oh my gosh, I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to gain a bunch of weight. And it's interesting because there's a lot of this stress on this one given day. But for most people, they couldn't think twice about their food intake and gaining weight the other 364 days out of the year, or the other days that are not holidays. So it's interesting when these one days that are holidays cause the most stress around food, when really these days should be the days you should be the least amount of stressed about food. And that's how, like, I am too. So my biggest tip, and I'm going to give you a long list of tips. So this is going to be a really informative one, really helpful one in a variety of ways. But the biggest thing is just simply don't overcomplicate it. I find too many people overcomplicate how to approach Thanksgiving. And at this time of year, you're probably scrolling on social media and seeing so many other coaches, fitness coaches, whoever, giving, okay, here are 5 tips to stay on track and lose body fat on Thanksgiving, or 5 tips to make sure you don't overeat. And there's just a lot of this like messaging being thrown out. And I get it, because it's this time of year. Those are the types of videos that are probably going to get the most views. So that's what coaches put out. And full transparency, like, I used to make posts like that too, because I'm like, oh, this is helpful and this is going to help people, because people are worried about gaining weight on Thanksgiving and this is going to help them. But as I've just grown as a coach, and I've done this for long enough, and I've worked with so many people, like, this day, Thanksgiving, this holidays in general, really don't need that much energy, like mental energy and focus towards them. There are a few simple things we want to kind of keep in mind, but like, that's really it. So my biggest tip with all of this is to just not overcomplicate what you need to do to avoid weight gain, because it's really pretty simple when you really think about it. Um, and it comes down to two things. Put up the number one when I meant to. Comes down to two things when it comes to making sure you don't gain weight on Thanksgiving. Number one is making sure you don't eat a ridiculous amount of calories. And I mean ridiculous. I don't mean eating, like, overeating a little bit. I don't mean eating a little bit more than the calories that you burn. I mean eating a ridiculous amount of calories, like something like 5,000 calories or so. Like, we want to avoid that. So comes down to that one thing, that's number one, is making sure you don't eat a ridiculous amount of calories. And then it comes down to number two, which is simply making sure that if you do overeat calories even a little bit, or even if you do eat a ridiculous amount of calories on Thanksgiving, that doesn't become a habit of yours the day after Thanksgiving, the day after that, the day after that, the week after that, and especially between this kind of lull period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, making sure, like, these days of overeating don't bleed into a whole entire month of overeating. Those are the only two things you really need to focus on. Now, I'm going to give you some tips, practical tips, some mindset tips to help avoid that from happening. But those are the two things. And if you can not eat a ridiculous amount of calories and eat your normal amount of calories to, like, the day after Thanksgiving and the rest of, the period, December, you're going to be completely fine and you're not going to gain weight. So other variables, like how much protein you're eating, fruits and vegetables you're getting, water intake, step count, all of those things do matter a little bit on Thanksgiving. But like they really don't in such a short like snapshot. Like think about if you were to be perfect with all those variables, your calories, protein, steps, fruits and vegetable intake, workouts. If you were to be perfect with all of those variables in one day, is it going to make you significantly lose weight? Probably not. Like you have to consistently do those things to lose a significant amount of weight. So if you have one day where you throw all of those things nearly out the window, protein, steps, fruit, vegetable intake, water intake, activity, um, are you going to significantly gain weight on that day? No, like the opposite works the same way. So, like, not saying not to focus on protein, not saying not to focus on fruits and vegetables on Thanksgiving, not saying not to focus on activity, but if you at least just keep your calories from getting ridiculous, you will be perfectly fine. I actually just went on vacation last week and I didn't track my food all week. I didn't count my protein intake all week. I didn't do any meal prep. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't even work out. I did get a lot of walking in. We were in Disney, so I got a lot of steps in naturally. But all I did was approach it with the mindset of, let me choose foods that are going to make me physically feel good and not make me feel sluggish. Let me eat till I'm like 70-ish% full and let me just try to control my calorie intake. And without even tracking, I just thought, let me kind of control my calorie intake by monitoring my fullness. And I came back and I actually lost a few pounds. So, um, and that was for a whole week too. And I probably didn't even lose any muscle or anything from under eating on protein just for 1 week either. So those other variables, protein, fruits, vegetables, water intake, all that stuff do matter. And there are some tips I'm going to give you with those things at the end of this. But one day of just like kind of ignoring those variables or not really putting that much emphasis on them and focusing just on, let me just keep my calories from being enormously high, like you are going to be fine. Um, and when you simplify it to that, it makes it so much less overwhelming. If you think there's just one variable, calories, and I don't even have to track it, I just have to make sure I'm not significantly overeating them, then like staying on track on Thanksgiving feels way less daunting because it's just one little variable that you have to focus on. So here are some tips. Let me kind of go into some tips that I think are going to be really helpful for this. So these first set of tips are going to be more mindset tips because I feel like the mindset regarding Thanksgiving is what causes 90% of the problems that people have with overeating and eventually it causing weight gain. So, mindset tip number one is that fat gain is not black and white, it's always on a spectrum. So, just because you quote unquote overeat, meaning you eat more calories than what you burn, there's a big difference between eating 200 calories more than what you burn versus eating 1,500 calories more than what you burn. Those two scenarios can technically be labeled as overeating because you're eating more calories than what your body burns per day. So there might be some kind of fat gain, but there's a big difference in storing an extra 200 calories of fat versus storing an extra 1,500 calories of fat. An extra 200 calories of fat will be what, like less than zero point 0.1 pounds of fat you're gaining, where 1,500 calories of fat of extra being stored will probably be almost a half a pound of body fat. So use that and realize, okay, just because I, had a little bit dessert, extra dessert, and I had a little bit of extra stuffing, and I know, I probably ate more calories than what I burned. There's no reason to feel like, well, screw it. I'm going to just eat even more because I already overate. I already gained a little bit of body fat. Let me just gain as much body fat as possible on this day and then move on the next day. Don't have that mentality. Realize like you can minimize the fat gain by just being conscious and realizing like you don't have to have that all or nothing mentality. You don't have to have that all or nothing mindset. You don't have to slash all four of your tires just because one tire is flat. So that's mindset tip number one. Number two is remember that this is not your only day to enjoy these types of foods. The way, I coach my clients, if you're a client listening to this, you obviously know this, which is all foods can fit into your daily nutrition, your weekly nutrition, If you incorporate them into your calorie goal, if you incorporate them into your protein range in moderation, you can see the same exact results. Like what completely changed my life was when I first started tracking my food and I realized I could eat a Pop Tart per day while making sure I'm hitting my calorie and protein ranges and my workouts and so on, and lose the same amount of fat as if I didn't eat that Pop Tart and I ate something else that filled in the same amount of calories. So these foods, pie, cookies, stuffing, you can enjoy them any day of the year that you want and still be healthy, still see really good progress, still love your body composition. So this isn't your like one day where you're out of jail and you're like, I gotta eat all of the stuffing I can because starting tomorrow on Friday after Thanksgiving, stuffing's off the table. Or starting tomorrow or starting this weekend, starting next week, like pumpkin pie, can't eat it because it's bad. Like, no, you can enjoy pumpkin pie literally every single day if you wanted to. You can enjoy a small piece of pumpkin pie as long as you fit it within your calories and protein, be perfectly healthy, have a great body composition, be lean, see progress, all of that. So remember that this is not your only opportunity to enjoy these foods, because I think so many people think that Thanksgiving is like my only chance to enjoy pumpkin pie. So they're like, well, I'm going to have 2 or 3 pieces because pumpkin pie is off limits starting next week or starting tomorrow. And that doesn't have to be the case. So realize that. Um, Another mindset tip is that there's a big difference between a small piece of pie and a big piece of pie. And this kind of goes in line with that first mindset tip as far as fat loss being on a spectrum. But just because you eat pie doesn't mean you have to go all out and eat a big piece of pie. Like people have these mentalities of there are good and bad foods. And if you eat a bad food, even if you eat a small amount of it, like you're still gaining body fat, it's still doing damage. So might as well have a big piece, when that's not the case. Like you could eat a small piece of pumpkin pie and maybe it's 200 calories, and maybe that puts you right at calorie maintenance. So you're not actually even gaining any body fat on Thanksgiving, versus if you decide to eat, a huge piece of pumpkin pie and that's 800 calories. Now you're 600 calories over your maintenance and actually gaining some body fat. And those are two scenarios where both scenarios you're enjoying pumpkin pie, you're having a piece, but one, you're taking the approach of realizing that like it's not the food itself that will cause fat gain. It is the quantity of that food that you end up eating. And you can enjoy these foods in moderation and stay within your calorie maintenance level and enjoy it, but also not go backwards in progress too. So remember, there's a big difference between a small piece of pie and a big piece of pie. There's a big difference between, one serving of stuffing versus 3 servings of stuffing. So you can enjoy all of these things, but do them in like amounts that are appropriate for you and your body. And don't feel like that just because I had a piece of chocolate, well, gaining body fat no matter what, because that's not the case. Um, Other tip, mindset wise, is do what's going to make you feel good physically. A lot of people are like going into Thanksgiving where, okay, I'm going to make good choices because I want to feel good and I want to feel like I don't know. I'm trying to think of another word than other than good, but they want to think I was a good person or I was a good client or I made quote unquote good choices. So I'm patting myself on the back and I'm not going to feel guilty. Don't make choices based off of guilt. Don't make choices based off of emotions. Make choices with your food based on how it's going to make you physically feel. Because if you do that, you probably will end up making the appropriate choice. Meaning, like, and I did the same thing when I was on vacation, where we would sit down for lunch and there were these options at some of these places we were eating there, and they would have like fried chicken strips, like chicken tenders, French fries, a grilled chicken sandwich, a burger, and this. And I'm like, okay, we're doing a lot of walking. I know I'm going to be moving a lot. Do I really want to eat a really heavy meal that's like fried chicken tenders, French fries, that's going to really sit in my stomach and make me just feel sluggish and not physically feel good? No, like I want to choose something that's going to make me feel like light on my feet. That's going to make me feel energized, make me feel like I want to actually walk around and move. So, I opted for like a grilled chicken sandwich instead because it's a little bit lighter and it just feels like I could go for a walk or something like that after eating it. And if you take that mentality of, okay, what is going to make me feel energized but not make me feel sluggish, then that will lead you likely to making appropriate choices with your portion sizes. Because if you eat a small piece of pumpkin pie, you might feel good to go for a walk after. But if you eat a huge piece of pumpkin pie, you're probably going to want to lay on the couch and not move. If you eat, a realistic portion of stuffing, mashed potatoes, like, you'll probably feel good to do something the rest of the day if you had to, like if there was some kind of activity or some kind of game you guys were playing outside or whatever it is. But if you completely load up your entire plate and stuff your face to where you're so uncomfortably full, then you're just going to want to lay around and maybe take a nap and not do anything. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to be like sitting on the couch. And it's like if you lean back too far, you feel the food in your stomach too much. You feel the reflux coming up and you got to sit forward and you like couldn't even lay down. That's another little tip too is think about, okay, if I were to lay down after eating this meal, lay down on my back, am I going to feel really uncomfortable? And if so, then like you probably want to eat a smaller portion or maybe choose a little bit different of an option. So think about how the meal is going to make you feel physically. And not guilt wise, not emotion wise, not like are you going to feel like you did quote unquote good, but how is it going to make you feel physically? Is it going to make me feel sluggish and low energy and really bloated and uncomfortable where I'm burping and have a lot of gas and this and that? Or am I going to feel energized, light on my feet, and just physically feel good? So think about that too. And then also kind of my last mindset tip, and then we'll go into some like more practical tips, is remember that your happiness can come from food some, right? Like we enjoy food, food tastes good, it brings back memories. But really, this food on Thanksgiving, the happiness that we get from it comes from the people around us. And realize that that's what matters the most. So you don't need to necessarily enjoy all of the foods in these huge amounts to really, be grateful on Thanksgiving. You can enjoy them in moderate amounts, eat to where you're 70% full. You feel good. You're not eating to where you're uncomfortable. You're testing out, small pieces of each of the desserts because you want to taste everything, but you're not having crazy, enormous pieces. And like just be present with the people around you. Like that's what these holidays and these celebrations, in my opinion, are really about, are like the people around you and being grateful for and thankful for your overall life. And you don't need to binge on these foods to feel those feelings of thankfulness or gratefulness. So, realize kind of like the real meaning behind these celebrations and why we all get together and get all this good food. It's while the food is really good and it's enjoyable, but it's more so about the people around you. So be present in that. So those are kind of my mindset tips. Um, Here are the practical tips. So practical tip number one is don't starve yourself beforehand. Eat some kind of pretty solid breakfast and lunch that really emphasizes protein maybe a little bit more and fruits and vegetables. So I find some people think, okay, let me just not eat breakfast, not eat it all day. We're going to eat Thanksgiving around 2, and then I'm going to have all the calories, just binge and smash everything. Sometimes it works out and you end up being at calorie maintenance, but it sets yourself up to eat way more than what you need to on Thanksgiving. It sets you up to also feel uncomfortably full afterwards because you're binging so much on those foods. And then you kind of like ate all these foods in one meal, feel uncomfortable, feel bloated. And maybe you enjoyed yourself more because you had a little bit more calories to work with, but I've found time and time again, if you just have a decently sized breakfast, doesn't have to be huge, it can be moderately sized, but that emphasizes protein and fruits and vegetables, you like still have a decent amount of calories left over for Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving meal, but you also aren't ravenously hungry going into it. So you're able to make more sound, make more educated, or make more mentally present decisions as far as, okay, do I want to have a big piece of pie or just one? Or do I want to have one piece of pie or two? Like, you're able to make those better decisions when you aren't ravenously hungry and you don't feel the need to have to binge on this Thanksgiving meal because filled yourself up decently well the rest of the day. So don't starve yourself leading up to it. Practical tip number 2 is when you're filling up your plate, really think about these 3 boxes you want to check off: protein, vegetable, and carbohydrate. And you want to fill up your plate in that order. So the first thing you want to grab is your portion of turkey or whatever kind of meat you guys are having, and have that be at least a fourth of your plate. Then you want to grab some kind of vegetable side, like green bean casserole, whatever vegetables are there. You want that to be probably close to about half of your plate. And then the third tip is filling in your carbohydrate with the rest, which probably will end up being about a quarter-ish of your plate. Maybe you could make the vegetables a third of your plate, so then you are able to have a third of your plate carbohydrate, so you have a third protein, a third vegetable, a third carb, because I know you probably want to enjoy smashed potatoes and stuffing, so you have some room for that. But think about filling in those gaps of your plate and starting with the protein first, then your vegetable, then your carbohydrate. And then when you eat your food, eat it in that order too. So eat the protein first, then eat the vegetable second, and then eat the carbohydrate last. And that will allow you to kind of fill yourself up on the protein and the vegetables first before moving into the carbs, because the carbs just tend to be a little bit less filling. And then, as long as you're staying present and monitoring your fullness, you are able to kind of stop when you're full. Which kind of brings me to another tip, which is, don't feel like you have to eat everything on your plate just because you put it on there. And I know you don't want to be rude and you don't want to throw away food, but if you're uncomfortable or you're getting there and you're like, hey, I'm already getting kind of full and satisfied, I have like 5 more bites of mashed potatoes, like, don't shove them in your mouth just to eat them. Like, if you don't want to eat them and you're satisfied and you're getting full, just don't eat them. It's not worth making yourself feel uncomfortable. And people should understand that. Like, if they brought food and you throw some of your plate away and you're like, I'm so stuffed, like, or I'm getting there, I know if I eat more, I'm going to feel really sick and uncomfortable. They should understand that. And if they don't understand that, then that's on them and that's not on you. So don't feel like you have to finish your plate if you are like really approaching to where like you're getting too full. Next tip is when you're filling up your plate, put a little bit less on your plate than what you think you actually want to eat. So I find Thanksgiving is like one of those meals, I mean, really holiday meals in general, where everybody wants to try everything. And they're like, okay, if there's any open space on my plate, then I'm doing it wrong. And I'm going to stack up as much food as I can on this plate. That way I don't have to get up. I don't have to go and get seconds, and I can just eat that. But the problem with that is kind of goes on that point I made just previously, which is when we have this food on our plate, we feel like we need to finish it. So instead, just put a little bit less on there than what you think. Like, put decent sized portion of turkey, but especially the like carbohydrate options. Put like, if you think you want a full scoop of mashed potatoes and a full scoop of stuffing, put just a half a scoop of each on there. And by doing so, you're making your plate, the food on there, a little bit smaller than what you think. And you're not saying that going to get seconds is off limits. You have the freedom to do that, but it's creating time and delay and some friction between having too big of a portion. Because when you put a little bit less on your plate than what you think you want to eat, you can finish that and sit there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, and think, okay, am I really hungry for more? Do I really want to eat more? Is eating more going to make me feel uncomfortable, or am I going to feel satisfied if I just stop now? It gives you that little bit of a break, a little bit of delay, even if it's just for a few minutes, to really kind of be present and assess that. Versus if it's just on your plate, it doesn't create that like separation between that second portion that might fill you up too much. And then if you do really want more, you can always get up, walk to the counter, put some more on your plate and come back, but at least creates a little bit of that barrier. So like, and I find that our eyeballs tend to be a little bit bigger than our stomachs too on Thanksgiving. So we think that we're going to want all of this food. But then when you end up trying like literally every single dish that somebody brings, you realize, oh man, that was more food than what I thought. So put a little bit less on your plate consciously than what you think. Set yourself up to like have seconds, like have that be the baseline of I'm going to go up and get seconds if I feel hungrier versus I'm going to load up my plate and that way that's my full plate that I'm going to have and I'm not going to get more. That actually sets you up to probably overeat more versus putting less on your plate and going to get seconds. Other tip is if you're going to have desserts, there's a good chance you're probably going to want to try a couple of desserts. Like if there's pumpkin pie, apple pie, some cookies, whatever, there's a good chance you're not just going to want one of those. You're probably going to want to get a little bit of variety of taste, you know? So think about like, who are you with that would be open to splitting some dessert with you? Or if you're comfortable of just like getting a really small piece of pie, that's fine. But it might be awkward to like cut a super tiny piece maybe. But find someone like, you know, my wife, like we could grab a piece of pumpkin pie and a cookie and be like, hey, like let's split this piece of pumpkin pie and split this cookie so we can both enjoy both, but it's a smaller portion. So we're less likely to overdo the calories by doing that. So that is a really good strategy too, of finding somebody who you feel comfortable splitting a dessert with. That way you can, you know, taste a little bit of variety of desserts, you know, that, you know, maybe your grandma, your parents, your whoever other family member maybe have made that like you don't really get a chance to eat often because they have the special recipe. Like it allows you to kind of enjoy more of those things without overdoing the portion size as much. Other tip, I kind of talked about it a little bit too, which is eat until you're 70% full instead of 100%. Like think about your fullness on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0% to 100%. And 100% full or 10 is like, I'm really uncomfortable. I am stuffed. I couldn't eat anymore. I can't even lay down because I feel uncomfortable. I probably need to go change my pants or unbutton my pants to feel comfortable. That's a 10. Think about being 70%, where like if somebody took away all the food there, you would be fine and you could go another few hours without really getting hungry. But if somebody was like, hey, eat this other piece of pie, you probably could force yourself to eat it too. Like you want to stop to where you are satisfied, but you're not full and stuffed. You don't want to be sitting there describing yourself like, oh, I'm so full. If you did that, then you probably overdid it a little bit. So try to think, okay, like I'm getting there. If I ate maybe 5 to 10 more bites, I probably would be actually full. Let me just stop here and just be satisfied. So aiming around that 70% mark is a good strategy there. Another tip, practical tip, is get some activity in your morning if you can. If you have a workout scheduled and you're able to make it to the gym or have access to equipment, get a quick workout in the morning. I know a lot of people do like 5Ks or turkey trots and things on Thanksgiving. Go for a walk, get some movement in if you can. Just starting your day with some kind of health promoting behavior puts you in the mindset of, okay, like I feel good. I feel healthy today. I want to keep that feeling going. Versus if you just start the day and you're really sluggish laying around, you're just in that like slug mentality. And you're like, well, I'll just eat a crap ton of food today and just continue to be sluggish and lay around all day and I'll be fine. You kind of fall into that mentality a little bit more. So if you don't work out on Thanksgiving, like that is fine. I likely won't be working out just the way my training program is set up and the way the days fall. But if you do have a workout planned for that day, if that's normal for your week, and you have access to equipment, have access to a gym, your gym's open, you have the time to do it, or even to just go for a walk for 30 minutes, like just something as simple as that will help to put you in that health conscious state. I already kind of talked about this, but think about how you'll feel physically, not mentally. Detach from the guilt, detach from the emotional feelings, and think, how will I feel physically if I eat to 100% fullness and I'm completely stuffed and uncomfortable versus how will I feel if I stop at 70% full? Won't go into that anymore since I kind of already talked about that a lot. Another tip is to find something fun or some kind of game or activity that you can do with the people around you. if you're just sitting around at the table, on the couch, just talking, not really doing anything, like that's great. And you're bonding with, the people around you and having good conversation, catching up is amazing. But it's easier to overeat and just like snack on cookies after you're already full or drinks or whatever it is. If you're just kind of sitting around versus if there's some kind of game like examples, cornhole, card games, board games, whatever it is, whatever kind of fun games, you and your family maybe play around this time of year or when you get together. Those things keep you mentally stimulated and mentally focused on the game and what's going on. So you're less likely to eat out of boredom. Like it would be really hard to just eat cookies and everything, like overeat on those as you're playing something like Spoons. I don't know if you've ever played Spoons, but that's a game we've played a couple of times. Like you just can't. Like you're so busy flipping the cards over, watching the spoons that like you aren't putting cookies in your mouth in between like looking at cards. So like when you are able to mentally stimulate your mind and put your focus on something like that, it takes your focus away from just eating out of boredom. And then kind of the last practical tip, which is just be grateful. And I guess this is the mindset tip, but be grateful for your body and the body that you have and the food you're able to provide it with. Like this shouldn't be a day where you're overly stressed, where you're worried about sabotaging all of your results. You're not going to sabotage all of your results in one day, even if you did ridiculously overeat. Now we want to prevent that, but even if you did and it just lasts for one day, you're still not going to reverse all of your progress. So just be present, be grateful, think about like how thankful you are for the people around you, the food here, even the fact that you can have all this food around you. Like there are people out there who don't have the resources to have a good Thanksgiving meal, and just be thankful for that. And there's some other tips too that I kind of want to go over to remind you, but let's go over these too because I don't want to forget about these. But I know the scale is a big thing of people stepping on the scale the next day. And there's no right or wrong answer to this if you should or shouldn't. If you do feel really uncomfortable, bloated, and you really did feel like you overdid it on Thanksgiving, maybe skip the scale on Friday and just weigh in again Saturday or Sunday once you've gotten back to your routine for a couple of days. If you do see a huge spike in the scale on Friday, it's not a bunch of fat gain, even if you did ridiculously overeat. You're not going to gain that much body fat in one day, even if you do really overdo the calories. That 2-3 pound weight gain you might see on the scale is all just water retention. But if it's going to mentally get inside your head, maybe skipping the scale on Friday and starting again on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe even Monday, once you've had a few days back into your normal routine, could be a good strategy. So, if it's going to really mentally get to you, maybe do that. But also realize, like when it comes to body fat gain, scientifically, physiology wise, you would have to eat 3,500 calories over your maintenance to gain 1 pound of body fat. So if you burn 2,000 calories a day, you would have to eat 5,500 calories on Thanksgiving to actually gain 1 pound. So even if you see the scale weight go up by 3 pounds, if you're not eating at least 5,500 calories, not even one of those 3 pounds was body fat gain. So remember that. Remember that one day will never make or break your results. One day of being perfect will never make you lose a bunch of body fat. And one day of like being way off with your calories is not going to make you gain a bunch of body fat. Now, we don't want to purposely go way overboard or be ridiculous with our food intake, but we also don't want to be pulling out our food tracker and tracking our food and being obsessive about things either. So hopefully these tips helped. Like I said, bottom line, if you can just simplify it to, okay, let me listen to my hunger, stop when I'm 70% full, not overdo it, follow all of these tips and strategies that I gave you, it will help you to just keep your calories from being a ridiculous amount. And that's all we want to do. And if we do that, it was a huge success. Even if we don't do that and we way overeat, but we get right back on our normal diet the next day, don't ridiculously like slash calories the next day to make up for anything, but getting back to our normal calorie intake the next day, we're going to be perfectly fine. So hopefully this was helpful, eye-opening. Appreciate you all. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.